Starting with the People's Choice Classic, 51 kilometres, very fast riding on a 1.7 kilometre circuit. This does not count for the overall in the Santos Tour Down Under. This very much is the hors d'oeuvre for the race that will begin on Tuesday. I'm Phil Liggett, alongside me is Paul Sherwin. And Paul, beautiful weather, great teams, all the World Tour are here, the scene is set.
Well, the scene is set downtown Adelaide, Phil, because, you know, this is a very exciting race route around here. A very fast race route as well. A little bit of a sweeper, if you like.
Well, the crowds are big, believe me, as we look down at the crowd down there as they go through the terraces here, which are just on the rim of the city of Adelaide. A nice pleasant stroll this evening. It's a 1.7 kilometre course, Paul. Massive crowd. We expect between 50 and 65,000, and we'll try and show you now the route itself. It's a familiar route, this one.
Yes, right downtown, 1.7 kilometres around, as you said, Phil. 30 laps the riders face up to, for a total of 51 kilometres of racing. And it's not too far away from the very famous Rundle Mall. In fact, they start in Rundle Road, come straight through the start-finish line, immediately turn left, and then they've got a little bit of a chicane before they turn right into Bartels Road. And right at the end of that road, there's a very fast left-hand bend before they line themselves up for the slightly downhill finish, where we'll probably see speeds approaching 60 kilometres an hour.
Well, there's the start finish, and the riders just rolling away here now. A gentle rollout as they get to know now themselves for the first time in the 2016 season. The World Tour will start on Tuesday. The World Tour teams will start the action right here today, and it looks as though the Astana boys are going to liven things up.
Well, straight out of the blocks. I wouldn't be surprised if that's not a certain man by the name of Lars Boom, because just recently he rode a cyclocross race. You know, he's a multi-champion, world champion in the cyclocross, and when he came to the top of professional road cycling, he was exceptionally good at short, violent prologue time trials.
Yes, and Lars Boom, only one win last year for Lars, and that was in the Tour of Denmark, but immediately a split in the field.
Well, it is Lars Boom. Look at that, and he stretched everyone out there very, very rapidly. They want to hot this race up, and as you mentioned earlier, Phil, I think 51 kilometres the total. They probably will finish this race off in around about the 1 hour margin.
Well, we'll get our first journey around at the course here now in this wooded area. The temperature, by the way, is just over 32 degrees Celsius here, which is just south of 90 degrees Fahrenheit if you're watching our pictures in the United States. First lap of 30.
Well, in the middle there, in the dark black jersey with the blue streak down the middle, Geraint Thomas. I don't expect to see too much from him this afternoon. For a lot of these riders, Phil, it's their first real aggressive move of the year. And for Lars Boom, just look at that face on him. He's the rider in first position ahead of 3 riders from Team Astana. This is going to put a lot of pressure onto Team Orica Green Edge, because I think they've got the fastest man in the field, Caleb Ewan. But, you know, to win the sprint at the end, you've got to make sure that everybody comes down into that finishing straight together. And look at the damage that's being done already. I don't think we have ever seen over the years such a rapid start to this opening race.
No, well, we expect speeds averaging around 30, 31 miles an hour, 48, 49 kilometres for the average speed today. The second stage of the women's Santos Tour Down Under was held just before. It was only a short one. It was only over 12 miles, 20 kilometres tonight. Annette Edmondson is a big hopeful here in Australia for a place on the Rio Olympic women's team. She took out the stage there, but we did have 1 or 2 falls.
Well, I just got a bit of a smile on my face here, Phil, because you know there'll be 1 or 2 riders in that bunch who will be swearing at the move by Lars Boom on the front there, because everybody, immediately we come out of the starting gate, is under serious pressure.
So Boom looking at all the riders, checking over. He said he didn't have a very good year last year, and with only his 1 victory, which came on the opening day of the Tour of Denmark, he did hold the lead for a couple of days, and he also won a criterium in the Netherlands, but not too many professionals count those small races. They're more crowd entertainers.
Well, I think a lot of riders, Phil, will be very concerned about a big split getting clear. In the past, this race, we've seen it dominated by breaks of 4 and 5 riders, and that is something that's quite manageable. You can pull a 4 or 5 man breakaway group back down towards the end of the afternoon, but when you see 15 to 20 riders splitting off the front end of a peloton like this, it takes a serious, concerted, organised effort to bring it back together. But it seems they've all of a sudden calmed the ardours of Team Astana, but Astana still coming out on the attack.
This is Vestra here trying to move clear on the second lap. He had a pretty thin year last year, but he has been right up amongst it, and it looks as though we're going to be joined by Tinkoff. Just the single name Tinkoff this year. They've dropped the Saxo add-on now as they come through. And a number of riders and teams have changed this year. Different names, same organisation in many ways. For example, MTN Quebecer is now Dimension Data. They've got a good team here this year.
No, they have, and I think they've got to, it's difficult to wonder who is going to be the sprinter this evening for Dimension Data, because they've got, of course, Tyler Farrar, the American, but they've also got Mark Renshaw, who really knows this circuit very well.
Well, Vestra pushing on. He's getting joined by a couple of riders who are tagging on to the back here. Peter Kenyuk, number 34, in that white jersey of the British champions, to go down the terraces here. Looking on with interest. This has got off to, as Paul has said, to a pretty quick start here. Perfect conditions, though, for the riders as they go around. Break forming. Two riders continuing forward, but judging by the length of that peloton back there, as we're on lap number 3, there's a lot of interest not to allow this early break to get clear.
Well, you can see on the front of the main field, Phil, there's quite a big organisation of the riders from Orica Greenedge. They realise they'll be under serious pressure. I know they want to get the first big victory under their belt here. Of course, Caleb Ewan is, of course, we saw him very dominant in the Bay Series early on this year. He's also the Criterium National Champion. And I think with that speed in his legs, he's got to be the big favourite to win this evening. But to do that, he's going to have to count a lot on his team in the early part of this race.
Yeah, so we've got Lotto Jumbo also going on. I think it's Ivan Rovny there who's moving clear with Tinkoff. As we get down there, it's got a nice little gap for them. There are sprints on laps 5, 10, 15 and 20 before we have the finishing sprint on lap number 30. The big winners over the past 4 years, only 2 winners, Andre Greipel, Marcel Kittel, both not here at the moment. And it's Manuela Boro, I think, now, along with Liva Westra up front.
Well, now that they're getting themselves sorted out, they know this circuit. It's a very rapid circuit. There's hardly any of these corners where you have to touch the brakes, but immediately we come into the finishing straight. Boiro from Tinkoff is the man leading them through there, followed by the rider in second position, Rolik, and leading the main field. Not a surprise, Phil, to see coming up towards the finishing line, that team from Uni SA, and it's Sean Lake.
Yes, nice little tail there. Geraint Thomas also behind Sean Lake as they went through, nothing much in it. Geraint Thomas just testing his legs, I think, because we've got to count on him as a serious contender. He's got onto the back now. He's got himself a new pair of white sunglasses.
Well, he certainly has. He lost his sunglasses in that very dramatic crash at the Tour de France, but he's seen this as an opportunity. But you've got the main field very much under control of Team Astana, but it's been a very rapid start here in downtown Adelaide, and what a huge crowd on the far side of the course.
Interesting. Well, we're looking here at beautiful Adelaide here with the cities all around as we continue here. Now this is a case of discovering Adelaide here, as the riders now will see views here of the Adelaide Oval. You can follow the trail here down the River Torrens as we head out either running and bicycling and enjoy the area around the Adelaide Oval here, which is the iconic place, as you continue to view the vineyards which abound in the Adelaide Hills, and also, of course, not far away, the beautiful crisp beaches of Adelaide where you can enjoy the sunset. So alongside me now and joining us is a man who's won 12 stages, I think, Robbie, of this race. And you've won the Classic a few times as well, haven't you, Robbie McEwen?
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, I did manage to get up a couple of times in the Classic when it was like this, not part of the actual Tour Down Under, and then a couple of times when the Criterium used to be part of the Tour Down Under, and some good memories around the streets here.
Well, that's the bell, not for the last lap. As you can see, we're on lap number 5 here now, so this opens the sprint competition for the evening now. So as a sprint next time around as they come on to the sprint scene. Now let's see if they line this up one for the sprinters. Might give us some indication, Paul, as to see exactly who might be lining up for the final sprint. This is the Subaru Sprint Lap.
Well, I'd be very surprised to see Caleb Ewan getting himself mixed up in the sprint this early on. If you want to win this race, you've got to count all of your pedal strokes and sit in the main field. Try and hover just a little bit towards the front of the main field, not really going into the red zone at all, and wait for the final sprint. But it is a good chance to see who's interested in taking part in the early part of the race.
Well, we do know one thing for certain when it comes to these intermediate sprints in this Criterium. Uni SA are always interested. The young riders have got to start in this race, their first crack at the big time. They're always keen to get up and show themselves. And I see one sliding up the right-hand side now, placing a little attack right on cue. So thank you to him.
Yes, the Uni SA, well, the university itself of South Australia is celebrating 25 years of being this year. And while the Tour Down Under is celebrating its 18th year. And these are the sort of moves we expect here as they start this. Chris Hamilton, it looks like, who's having a little dig here on the straight. He's a very fast sprinter, but he's gone, I think, a little bit too early here because the bunch are after him.
Well, just look at the man in third position in the line in the main fielder. You notice those white sunglasses. Geraint Thomas is being very attentive in this early part of the race this afternoon. They're into the finishing straight. Now let's see who's got the fastest turn of speed.
Well, Geraint Thomas is not going to take part in this as he swings away. It looks like Dimension Data here having a little dig up for the line. As he goes over the line, it's Irene Janse van Rensburg there looking at the camera, the South African member of Dimension Data, who takes out the first sprint.
A little bit of a goatee going on there, a bit of a Mark Cavendish style looking there. Cavendish at the moment racing in Hong Kong, trying to get himself qualification for the Olympic Games in the Omnium, but that was a clean pair of wings for Van Rensburg.
Yeah, very tidy little sprint, and a nice little lead out from Geraint Thomas and DeMarchi, who closed down. I think it was Pat Lane there from Uni SA. As we said, they're always keen to go on the attack in this race. I tell you what, fellas, I don't think I've ever seen such a fast start in this race as we did tonight from the Astana boys, backing each other up. It was first Boom and then Westra and going on and on with it. But it's always the Aussie boys who seem to come to the fore in this race. They've got those early season criteriums in the legs, and here we see one of the Drapac riders reinforcing that again. When the Euros seem to just need to catch their breath, it seems to be the Australian riders who can just push on and make that extra attack.
Well, 18 of the World Tour, all of the teams, of course, are here for the World Tour race. The Santos Tour Down Under gets underway on Tuesday. It's a 6-day race. They're all taking part tonight, but there are 2 other teams invited. The national team for Australia, which is under the colours of Uni SA, and the red jerseys of Drapac. They're here for a 3rd year and just trying to make an impression on these riders here.
Well, it's not a surprise to see Team Uni SA looking for the breakaway. As Robbie said, a lot of these guys are in good form. They've had a number of races in their legs so far, so they can make several efforts to go. And the riders are coming for their first real aggressive showing of the season. It's hard for them to get their breath for the 2nd or 3rd attack. But these kind of moves, I think it's going to make it very difficult for Orica Green Edge. They must, Robbie, I mean, you were out talking to them just a few moments ago. They must be in the back of their minds thinking, we've got the fastest man, but they've got to control the race.
They do. They know they've got the man in form. Caleb Ewan has started 6 races so far this season, and he's won 4 of them. Plus, he won the overall classification at the Mitchelton Bay Series. So they know they've got the man to ride for, and they're going to wind this race up towards the end to make sure it all comes back for a big sprint.
Well, there's the concentration. Looking down at the riders now, they're on lap number 7 here, and gradually bringing everybody together, although they're not allowing this bunch to become compact at all because somebody else has just shot off the front there.
Yeah, but I tell you, I don't think I would like to be racing this evening. I'm quite surprised to see how attentive Team Sky have, because they've also got a very rapid rider in their squad, and that, of course, is Ben Swift, and he will want to sit in the main field. You've really got to count your energy in a short, explosive event like this, Robbie, at the start of the season, and there's so many sprinters who'll be thinking tonight's the night.
Well, there's a lot of guys out there, I think, already know their night's almost over after that start. It's very difficult to start a criterium so fast, your very first race of the season. I'm sure there's a few of those Astana guys wishing they maybe hadn't gone quite so hard at the very start of the race. One thing I did just notice is Caleb Ewan is sitting really quite a long way back in the field. Easy, slow start, winding his way into it, not reacting to any accelerations. He's confident he can move up whenever he needs to.
Yeah, I think you've got to be careful about that, especially in a bunch this big on this circuit. It's 1.7 kilometres, just over a mile around each time. But I think you're right about Sky, Paul. I think they're trying to control this race for Ben Swift.
We can see another mover. Once the breakaway has started to get established, it's not at all a surprise to see Team USA trying to get somebody across the gap. They won't want to allow a breakaway to get established, because at speeds like this, it's very difficult to pull the race back together in the final few laps.
This is Puccio of Sky on the front at the moment. Jay McCarthy, the Australian, in that yellow jersey of Tinkoff. They start to punch their way out here. They're all checking on the bunch. They're not giving them any leeway at all. And not surprisingly, it's Orica Greenedge, the team of Caleb Ewan, who's trying to keep this race under control.
Well, very interesting, Robbie, that you noticed there that Caleb Ewan started at the back, and I think he can take the risk in a field of this size to sit near the back of the main field, because with riders at this level, at the top end of professional cycling, the main field's not going to split early on in a circuit race like this, because it is what I like to call this a sweeper of a course. You hardly touch the brakes.
And by the same token, it is quite difficult to pass when you want to pass, but Caleb Ewan's so handy on the bike, we know he can dive underneath and move up.
Down the laneways of Adelaide city centre, a resurgence of small bars is taking place, and they're adding new vigour to the city's nightlife. From designer brews to wine straight out of the barrel, if you really want to experience the heart of Adelaide, this is where you will find some of its real personality. And we're looking down not very far away from those bars on the People's Choice Classic here. 51 kilometres the full distance we're on lap number 8. It's a 1.7 kilometre lap of 30. And it looks as though Orica Greenedge are trying to keep this race in touch. Daryl Impey, the South African member of the team, on the front of that big field.
But of course, as you can see, if you look a little bit further down there, you can see Caleb Ewan's team on the front. The average speed of the few laps as we started is 50.3 kilometres an hour.
That'll take him inside the hour.
Very, very fast.
That really is a fast start, and you do see after a few laps everybody has to have that little break. Whoever can push on, have that little bit of luck to get away, and that's these four riders. And it includes, well, sometimes hard to get used to seeing guys in new kit, but Jesse Sargent, the Kiwi, he's in the AG2R kit in the brown and the blue and the white. He's made his way up into the front. He's already done some racing this season in the New Zealand Time Trial and Road Race Championship, found his way into the break, but it is Orica Greenedge trying to control things. And one of the riders I saw on the front there, and he's still right there crossing the line now, is the Swiss Michael Albacini. I spoke to him just before the start. I said, you've come all the way to Australia out of your winter. He said, I was so keen to race. I crashed out of the Tour de France. I haven't raced for 5 months. I just put my hand up. I have to do a race. I was getting bored doing all that training. Here he is on the front.
That is quite amazing. And there's the other riders here. Jaska Sutelin is the Movistar rider at the back there, wearing 1, 2, 3. Jesse Sargent, Jay McCarthy of Tinkoff in yellow, and Salvatore Puccio is the Sky rider setting the pace just now.
Well, they've got themselves nice and organised. I always find it very difficult, Roy, when you see the breakaway get organised to ride across the gap. But as you can see, Lucas Hamilton there, he's got the bit between the teeth. These guys are inspired when they ride the Santos Tour Down Under and this People's Choice Classic every year. They want to show themselves off to the crowd, but for them it's also the chance to show themselves off to some of the visiting team managers.
Exactly right, Paul. And you know, these guys get so excited about riding this race. They're not only representing Uni SA, they're the local team, but they're representing Australia. This is a huge chance, and they're very keen to get in any breakaway that goes. And Lucas Hamilton, one of the Hamiltons, no relation, they're not brothers, but he was right up there at the national championships. and he is a man in form. And you know, these guys, they're in such good form, they're really going to use it this week.
Yes, Lucas and Chris Hamilton, as Robbie said, not related. Both from the state of Victoria, though, and they got away in the Under-23 Road Race Championship, and Lucas was beaten into second place by Chris Hamilton. He's got up there, Paul. We've got 5 boys in front now.
We have, and you can see the counter move starting to come from Team BMC Racing in the black and red jersey. Now, that's going to be a formidable team once we get out onto the open road, because when you think of Rowan Dennis and Richie Port riding together, it looks very much as if this is Rowan Dennis trying for the hour record again, maybe, just to get the 1 hour of riding in.
Well, he's going to get 51 kilometres in the hour today, which is not quite the record he did on the track when he broke the record. We're going out onto lap number 10. This is the II-Net sprint now, next time around. And we've got 5 riders trying to drive on. Sargent, Suterlin, Puccio, McCarthy and Lucas Hamilton.
Well, when you've got a rider like Rowan Dennis determined to close the gap down, your minutes out the front are definitely numbered as a breakaway. But out there from Tinkoff, Team Tinkoff, is Jay McCarthy. And a lot of talk here in Australia has been about Caleb Ewan, the big winner early in the season, won a lot of races. But on the 1st of January, technically the first guy to win a race this year was Jay McCarthy. He won the New Year's Day Criterium up in Queensland. So he's the first winner of 2016.
Well, you can see that response. There he is, number 1 on his back, and he's done an exceptionally good job, Rowan Dennis. Said, right, enough is enough. He's pulled it all back together. But, you know, this, I think, is setting up the move now to see a little acceleration coming again for Team BMC Racing. They want a little bit of freedom here this afternoon.
Big effort here by Floris Geerts of Holland. Flicks his elbow. Nobody wants to take up the chase and work with him. Little rise there, hurts the legs at 50 kilometres an hour, which is 31.5 miles an hour up these slopes.
Well, going with Kurtz there is Lars Back, the Dane from the Lotto Soudal team, and he's always keen to get in the breakaway, the big Dane, a very good time trialist.
Just looking at the riders going through this corner, they're about to set themselves up for a sprint point when they come into the finishing line. But it's a good chance at speeds like this for the guys to get an idea of what sort of line to take around these corners. Because you explained a little bit earlier on to me, Robbie, how critical that previous corner is, maybe even more important than the final corner that the riders come into the finishing straight.
Yeah, it is important for the sprinters to get a real feel for the corners and where they need to be and how to line up for those corners, how fast they can take them. Because, of course, in that last lap, the speed really goes up like it has here, and it's a downhill run to the line. The speed is really so high, but I think the breeze is slightly against them today too, so it's going to make it a very tricky sprint. So we see one of the Tinkoff riders, and that's Jay McCarthy. He stayed out there to take the II-Net sprint.
Got the one over there on Janssen van Rensburg, who won the previous one. Didn't look too happy about that either.
Well, actually, what you were saying as well, Robbie, I spoke to Sean Yates yesterday, the team manager of Tinkoff, and he said as far as they're concerned, the dark horse to be the team leader for Tinkoff at this race is Jay McCarthy. He's got great form.
He's in very good form. He rode a good national championships. He's right up near the front of the race in the main peloton. Of course, it was all about Jack Bobridge, but Jay McCarthy was looking good all race, and I know he's been training very hard. I've seen him down on the Gold Coast where I live, and he's been out in the mountains there, and like I said, he won that race on New Year's Day, so he's not here to mess about.
There's McCarthy there. Interesting, Peter Seri there from Ethics was in 3rd place, and they've changed the colours this year, so we have to watch out for a darker blue. There's the winner down there. The average speed continues to stay right up. This is going to be a very quick hour of racing, and I think that's what it's going to be. We're going out on lap number 11. Jay McCarthy got the second sprint.
Oh, Phil, the lap 10, the riders went through their 51.5 kilometres an hour. That's fast.
So 2 riders are trying to join forces at the front. Lars Back is now up there, and there's 3 riders trying to get clear. The peloton are going to have to rethink this one. Having the concentration spoiled a little bit, because joining the 2 leaders up front now is Johan Le Bon, the Frenchman there. So we've got 3 riders going clear.
Yeah, Le Bon comes from Lannion in Brittany. He's a Breton. I used to race with his dad, and that shows you how old I'm starting to get. Dominique Le Bon.
His dad married John, you're all right.
It is interesting to see, though, the teams of the sprinters already coming into the 11th lap of 30 are starting to get themselves organised. I've got a funny feeling this evening, Robbie, one of the dark horses could be Team Movistar, because Juan Jose Lobato was second in this race last year, but he had a string of very good second places throughout the season last year to riders like Mark Cavendish and also to Kittel. So he really has got a very good turn of speed, and if the team get it right for him tonight, he could be the winner.
Well, he's got a definite turn of speed. We've seen him win in Stirling. I think maybe the harder sprints are a bit more suited, but he ran, like you said, a string of very good second places. And we often see a rider that one season they'll get a lot of second places and they take that next step up the following season. So it could be his year to really hit the big time, although I'm not so sure his team is a real sprint lead-out train, so they might be looking to place him on the back of another team and he ride them all the way in. And, you know, if he's got his wits about him, he could place himself onto someone like Caleb Ewan. Who knows, into that little head breeze, he could be a man to beat.
7 riders coming together now. The Drapac all red strip there is Adam Phelan's just come across the gap. They're just checking out what's happening behind. Again, it's been left to the white jerseys of Orica Green Edge to close this race down. They're trying to keep this race together because they know they have the firepower in little Caleb McEwen. It's Caleb Ewan, sorry. You know his father's name is Mark Ewan. Mark Ewan.
I get confused with them all the time.
Mark Ewan is your name. Oh dear. On lap 12 of 30.
Well, also my son's name is Ewan, so the confusion just continues.
Well, that's very difficult. I was very surprised when you called him Ewan McEwen, because must be rather strange at home when you're shouting for him.
Only use his first name. Well, I want commentators like you to be able to remember his name.
Home to 1.2 million people, Adelaide is described by Lonely Pandas as the perfect host city. It was founded in 1836 by Colonel Light. His plan for a beautiful city surrounded by parklands has evolved to see elegant 19th century sandstone architecture stand opposite edgy bohemian laneways. It's also surrounded by some of the most accessible wine country, and of course the capital city has plenty to offer, perfectly positioned as well. Back with the race here now, a massive crowd building all of the time as we're on lap number 13. They're not allowing much, but really when you're riding at speeds of 51 kilometres an hour, it's a little bit difficult to open a gap, isn't it?
Very difficult to get away and get yourself organised, especially when you've got a team like Team Orica Green Edge. I would think 6 riders on Orica Green Edge have just got one thing in the back of their minds there this evening, Robbie, and that's to make sure they keep this race nice and tight together, because they have complete confidence in their young man Caleb Ewan.
They do have complete confidence, and it is well founded with his start to the season. He's been completely dominant in the races that he's ridden so far. My only question mark is that will they be able to support him all the way into that last corner, the last couple hundred metres? Because the team is set up differently here around Simon Gerrans, going for an unprecedented 4th overall win of the Tour Down Under. It's all the same riders that ride the People's Choice Classic. He's without guys like Mitch Docker, for example, who are his regular lead-out men. I'm asking myself who's going to be his lead-out man and how will they play it, because I think there's a couple of other strong teams out there who may be able to outgun them in the sprint lead-out. And I'm thinking of a team like I Am with Lee Howard, with Roger Kluger, and also with Paolucci, who is their designated sprinter.
Nice show by Chris Hamilton here. A week since he won the Under-23 Road Race Championship. He's not allowed to wear the green and gold stripes of that championship because the actual champion is riding the race today, but he's still the Under-23 title holder, and he's got a pretty good turn of speed here.
Yeah, you mentioned IAM Cycling and Lee Howard. You know, he's a guy that we expected huge things from when he first turned professional with HTC, and we thought this is going to be the next new sprinter on the block. Then all of a sudden, like a lot of guys, that he seemed to have lost his way, but he's now talking this year very, very confident. I think he feels comfortable with the structure of the team. And do you think they'll give him a chance to be the winner tonight, or will they work for someone else?
Well, Lee did seem to lose his way somewhat there. He had a bit of pressure applied to him. You know, a very talented rider, world champion on the track in multiple disciplines, but he found it hard to convert that onto the road and become the top sprinter. And he's been taken into the IM Cycling team as the lead-out man. He's there to ride for Paolucci. And I was talking to David Tanner just earlier, and he said, no, it's Paolucci all the way. He's our number one, and Lee is there to be his lead-out man. Now, the rest of the Santos Tour Down Under has a few difficult days in the start. Palucci is not a noted climber, particularly in the start of the stage. So if he's dropped, Howard gets to step up. And maybe this year he'll really have that confidence to get amongst it. I think he's maybe just a little bit lacking in confidence when it comes to the bunch sprints.
Well, this is Chris Hamilton of UniSA trying to steal an advantage. It looked like he was being chased down very rapidly there by one of the riders from Team Astana as well, and that was the Belgian rider Laurent de Vries in the turquoise jersey. One of those funny things, Robbie, isn't it? You think, oh, this is a good idea, I'll get across the gap, then all of a sudden the wind starts to hit you in the face and you start pedaling in squares and you can't close down that final few metres.
Well, we've seen it quite a number of times in the Santos Tour Down Under. Some of the big established World Tour riders think they'll just jump across to one of the young riders from UniSA, and they get a horrible surprise. These guys are so fit at the moment. This guy, they call him Hurricane Hamilton. He's a mountain biker, and he couldn't decide what he wanted to do, so he was doing them both very well. It seems now he's going to put his focus onto the road. And national champion under 23, as Phil mentioned, and he is in blistering form. You see the Astana guy, he is drifting back to the peloton. He's not getting across.
You can see he's really pedaling so smoothly here, Chris Hamilton. And I don't think the Astana guy is going to cross this gap. He's got some great speed going here. Lap 14, another sprint next time around. This time it'll be the Europe car sprint. So it'll be worth staying away for the best part of 2 kilometres. Oh, he's heading up towards the bell this time for the lap 15 sprint. There it goes. And that, from this camera angle, looks as though he's got quite a little gap over the field.
Well, he's got about 9 seconds over the Astana rider, but 12 or 13 seconds over the main fielder. Confirmation just coming through there. Well, the computer's telling me it's only 6 seconds, but I think it's a little bit more than that. But the average speed of the leader, 50.4 kilometres an hour.
Just heading them through there is Marcel Arega, who is a Swiss rider on the IM Cycling. It looks as though it's beginning to hurt now, and so it should when you're averaging 50 kilometres an hour. You're Australian, you're in the city of Adelaide, you're performing in front of a massive crowd. We're well into the 50,000 range tonight.
Well, that's a little bit, Robbie, isn't it? The youthful enthusiasm. You make that move, and then all of a sudden you've got to you use huge wattage to open up the gap, but then you've got to maintain that advantage. And all of the time, you can't hide when you're in the lead on your own like this.
No, absolutely not. We've seen the high average speed above 50 the whole time, and it's never easy to attack, but the easiest part is getting the gap initially. Then it's a bit harder to build that gap, and it's near on impossible to maintain that gap when you've got most of the World Tour chasing you down on a circuit like this. You're very isolated out the front. He's extremely fit, great form, but it's such a tough ask.
What's interesting, though, if you have a quick look at the cluster of gears that he's got at the back there, he's actually riding quite a low gear and keeping a very high cadence up there, which is pretty impressive to keep an average speed in excess of 50 kilometres an hour.
Yeah, those young legs have some impressive leg speed, but I think some of the older, more experienced legs turning those big gears behind him, they'll start to eat into that eventually. But a team like Orica Green Edge, also IM Cycling, who are riding on the front at the moment, they'll be quite content to let him have a bit of a gap, even ease back a bit, maybe let him get out to about 20 seconds, and then just hold it like that. It stops all the attacking in the bunch. It's a lot more of a constant rhythm. It's easier for them to control, then they'll wind him back in and try to set Caleb Ewan up. We talk a lot about Caleb Ewan, but there's plenty of other sprinters out there today. We'll go through our list.
Well, we certainly will. I think Ben Swift could be a man from Great Britain to do well. Walter Weppert, you can't discount him. We haven't even seen him anywhere near the front yet. He's counting his pedal strokes in the main field, waiting for his chance to come out of the main field. And well, why not a little bit later on? Steele Van Hoff, we're not really sure whether he's got the form that we saw him about 12 months ago.
Well, Chris Hamilton deserved that sprint there for the Europe car sprint number 3, because his lap time went through was 2:17, but the previous lap was 2 minutes and 1 second, best time. And that was all down to him holding that big field off. Arega, Albacini, Michael Hepburn, and watch out, Juan Jose Lobato went through there in 4th place, and he was placed here a year ago. Looking here at Chris Hamilton, he's moved out now onto lap number 16. We're halfway through this race and just over half an hour of racing. So they're right on that 51 kilometre average speed if they can keep it up. And it's still Chris Hamilton, the Australian, who's riding here for UniSA, which is the university here of South Australia. celebrating 25 years of being this year, and it's always had riders giving them success in this event.
Well, Robbie, this is the moment when professional knowledge and professional tactics start to play. I think they've come to the point in the race where they feel confident, the main field, that with one rider off the front, they can allow him a little bit of freedom, because they know he can't sustain 50. He needs to sustain 53, 54 kilometres an hour if he wants to win this race on his own. And they know that they can pull that back almost at any time that they want to.
Well, riding that fast is already a huge ask if you're riding with time trial bars and disc wheels, and when you're on your own against guys like are riding behind him. What I saw there in the field was a number of riders sort of settling in, taking a drink. I even saw Michael Hepburn sneak a gel in, so halfway through the race, it's only short, you're not going to go hunger flat, but he's just making sure his energy levels are absolutely at the top, because he's going to be the man that Caleb Ewan is relying on to pull him into that last couple of 100 metres. They're not too concerned about this break, and one man against the bunch.
Michael Alcini on the far right there, doing a lot of pacemaking, very underrated bike rider, and on Orica Green Edge, of course, they've kept him again for another season as they swing in. That's the approach towards the finish. Oh boy, it's really hurting now for young Chris Hamilton here, but what a piece of riding he's done. Always selling his wares, showing the people of this that matter in Australia, this man is a talent of the future for sure.
You might just notice in his chainring there, that little yellow box stuck in the middle of the chainring. So many riders nowadays are measuring their wattage and measuring their heart rate to be able to feed that back to the team managers. And even in a race like this, they want to record as much information as possible for future training and future improvements later on in the season.
Well, I hope we can get our hands on some of that data. Maybe they'll share it a little bit with us, and we can get a bit more of an insight into the race and how much work those guys are putting in during the race. Some of those numbers are super impressive to see when you train yourself and know how much effort it takes.
Adelaide is the perfect place to begin your gourmet food adventure, with more than 700 restaurants, cafes, bars and pubs serving up cuisine from around the world. And for a unique experience, explore the 147-year-old Central Markets, which buzzes with life all year round. With fresh food smells and colour abounding, it's a melting pot of the city's food and culture. Lovely view on a lovely summer's evening in Adelaide, South Australia, from the helicopter here. 51 kilometres was the distance. These riders are trying to beat the hour for the distance today. And at the moment, and just being brought back, it looks, by the peloton, is Chris Hamilton.
There's a little group of 3 riders scuttling off the front as well now, as you start to see the organisation coming in here. This is the moment when you've got to be attentive. Once a breaker, you can see just being pulled back in there, Hamilton, just at the front of the main field, but they've been replaced now by a different group, a group of 3 riders now leading this race. And AG2R Le Mondial, that's one of the riders on the front. That's a team that's always aggressive when we come here to racing in Australia.
It seems to me that the French riders are always very aggressive, and AG2 are always an aggressive team in this race, and with a lot of success. They've had a number of past winners: Gilles Magnin, Simon Gerrans when he rode for them as well, Martin Elmiger, a member of that team when he won the Santos Tour Down Under. So a very good record that the team has, and they're always excited to be here and always keen to be on the attack.
I'll tell you what, Robbie, they've this group of 3 here, Manuel Boaro, Martin Velez and Christophe Riblon, one of the most experienced riders in the main field, the winner of the Alpe d'Huez, which is quite a reference, have actually hit this race at a very strategic moment and opened up a very quick gap.
And that's what you want. You need a group of 3, maybe 4 or 5 riders, and who get to work together very efficiently, very quickly. You can't afford to miss a turn or have someone miss a turn. You've got to start working together as hard as you can, as soon as you can, to open that gap and then challenge the field to come out and catch you. And that is an impressive gap they've opened up.
There's an amazing gap. There's been absolutely no let-up in the attacking riding here ever since this race began, which is only about 40 minutes ago, averaging just on 50 kilometres an hour. And now we've got Martin Velez on the front. That's the new colours of Ethics Quickstep for this season, much darker blue than the old team. Now bringing them through is Boaro, and then Christophe Riblon on the right, and they've opened up a gap of about 11-12 seconds.
Well, this is the moment when you can see that Orica Green Edge are leading the race on the right-hand side. Don't have too many mates in there, and queuing up to see whether or not they're going to fail are the riders in the dark blue and lime green jerseys of Team Movistar. But certainly at the moment, it's all up to Orica Green Edge to do the pacemaking.
Yes, the pressure's always on Orica Green Edge to do a lot of the work here in this race. One thing, they are Australia's World Tour team, so everybody knows they're keen to perform. There's pressure on them from sponsors and expectations of fans, but also they've got one of the big favourites. Everybody's been paying attention to these early season results. They know Caleb Ewan from last year, definitely after winning a stage in the Vuelta a España, beating John Degenkolb and Peter Sagan, no less. So when you've got a guy like that in the team and you're the local World Tour team, then you're going to get that responsibility pushed onto you. They're going to sit back and watch and make you do the work.
Well, just going through now, Martin Velits there, Manuel Boiro, he's an Italian, and he's in fact heading up towards his 29th birthday next month, or in March in fact. Just taxing. He's only won 2 races in his career, but one was last year when he won a stage of a French race, the Circuit of the South. As he comes through now, he's willing to put his back into this one, though.
Yeah, but I think they've got to be very careful of this 3-man group, because you're looking at Boiro, who's a very good time trialist. He was second in the National Time Trial Championship for his country a couple of years ago. Riblon is a very experienced professional. He's 36 years of age. He's won 2 stages of the Tour de France, one in the Pyrenees and one in the Alps. And when you see a man like him get into a breakaway like this, you realise that he's not going there just for a little bit of fun. He wants this breakaway to succeed. And Martin Velits, the rider we're looking at here, very strong rider, the elder of the 2 Velits twins. He was telling me just the other day that he was born just about an hour before his brother.
Well, there's a bit of one-upmanship for you.
Yes, and his brother's on a rival team, of course, and he's back in that main field at the moment, wondering probably what is going on up here. These 3 are willing to give it a go here. You can see by their faces, we're on lap 19 of 30, still a little way to go. 11 laps or so as Velits goes through. He's a Slovakian, by the way, Peter Velits and Martin Velits. This is Martin.
They might be Slovakian, Phil, but they really started off their career in South Africa, starting to ride for the Minolta Konica team. And in fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think Chris Froome rode for that team very early on in his career.
He did indeed.
Before they all moved across to Europe.
And now they're all seeing each other on the World Tour. This is Christophe Riblon. Moves over, willing to work. Boiro goes through, drives on, looking as though he's concentrating pretty hard here, living in hope. As Martin Velits quickly goes through, they're absolutely just driving this line through. They're not wasting any time at the front whatsoever.
You see a lot of riders very keen to get out and get racing again. First race of the season for most of these riders. Riblon, he's one of those. He's been a winner in the high mountains. He's completely on the wrong terrain, but he's gone and put himself into the breakaway. Keen to get amongst it, turn the legs over, maybe start warming himself up for the actual Santos Tour Down Under, which starts on Tuesday, and be ready to go on the attack when this race does go uphill.
Well, they had 15 seconds last time. That's the bell. Again, not for the last lap, but for lap number 20, which is the Alpecin sprint coming through next time. Winners so far as Reinhard Janse van Rensburg, Jay McCarthy and Chris Hamilton.
Well, we're talking about the rider sitting in second position, Christophe Riblon there. Not only did he go up the Alpe d'Huez on one occasion, he went up it on 2 occasions in the 100th anniversary of the Tour de France to win in a very dramatic start. It looks as if he'd lost everything, because he actually crashed on the descent, chasing after the American TJ Van Gardner, but he never gave up, and in the final few kilometres of Alpe d'Huez, he caught the American back up and went on to get a magical, I would say mythical and legendary victory.
It was a legendary victory, but here today, well, my money's not on the 3. I've just seen the first telltale signs of non-cooperation. Velits missed a turn, and then Riblon said, well, why don't you come through? So I want to come through, and they're sort of humming and hawing. They all 3 looked behind them, and now the train is starting to get set up. We see Orica Green Edge with 2 riders, Hepburn, Albacini, Sean Lake from UniSA with Pat Lane in his wheel, and then the Movistar team with Rojas and Lobato, 2 very fast men, so they've got a big interest in this one as well.
Well, it looked as if the breakaway was going to get itself established, but the moment that the big professional teams felt that they were starting to lose the grip, they said, right, let's get ourselves organised. Last time they came through the finishing line, the advantage was 14 seconds. This time, I think it'll be well inside the 10-second margin. They're still collaborating, these 3 seasoned professionals at the front end. They want to survive to get themselves as the sprint point, but certainly I think now as we come into the last third of the race, we'll see the organisation of the teams of the sprinters winding it up very gradually over the next few laps. and to set it up for a very big finale.
They should just survive as they take this left-hander sweeper into the finishing straight. And in fact, Burrows decided he wants the prize at the end in the Europe car sprint. As he goes well clear of the field, Martin Velits chases after him, but I think they've left it too late. And so it's the Tinkoff rider, Burrow, who will get the prize on the line. 14 seconds last time. I think we're going to find a reaction now, because Orica Green Edge, Michael Hepburn driving at the front, is trying to control this race. I'd be worried about Rojas in front of Labata, because that looks like the sprint setup.
Well, it's 12 seconds actually on the line, but Robbie, when you get an acceleration like that, it breaks up the momentum and the organisation of a breakaway group, and although you get the initial burst of speed, it takes down the overall average speed. So basically the main field can be pretty much close to pulling these men back in.
Well, I was just going to say, if these guys really started to sprint it out to take that sprint, those sprint points, then that would spell the end of the break, or the end of the cooperation in the group. With Sambuaro, he's gone through the line and then he's continued on. He's more happy to be on his own, but of course he's a man alone against the bunch instead of having two other mates to ride with out there in the breakaway. So he's not going to be out there for too much longer before they start to reel him back in, or he just blows on back by himself.
Well, in theory, it's too far to go. 9 laps still to ride here. But Manuel Aguero is going to give it a shot. They've won 2 of the 4 sprints on course, Tinkoff. So the team from Russia are celebrating their first day of racing here in South Australia. Looking back at the peloton now as Team Uni-SA, they've got a good sprinter there in Anthony Giacopo and Steele von Hoff, who's not quite showing the form he had of a year ago, but nonetheless he might find it tonight driving the peloton.
Well, there's Velits just about to get picked up by the main field, but actually, Robbie, you can see the urgency of these riders now as they get themselves organised into their trains. They don't want to start working too soon, because the most important thing about setting up a sprinter is to make sure you've got lots of effort and lots of energy and lots of teammates towards the end, because it's really power and strength in numbers.
Well, that's the thing about a sprint lead-out. It's not how soon you begin, it's how late you can finish it. If you start too soon, you're not going to make it all the way. As we see, Caleb Ewan has now moved himself up onto the wheel of Matthew Heyman, a little bit his guardian angel, his big brother. I'm surprised he can even get a sit, because you can actually look through underneath the seat of Matthew Heyman, such as the size difference between the two. But he's now at the front of the field, and Orica getting very serious about the chase and also starting to set it up for those final few laps.
Lap 22 of 30 now, so it's about 17 minutes of racing. That was a very fast lap by Boiro. He's gone through in 2 minutes and 10 seconds, quicker than the previous lap. The gap is as big as it's been, at 15 seconds, and the peloton there led by Orica Green Edge's Hepburn.
I suppose, Robbie, you could say one of the advantages that Orica Green Edge have got is that they've raced a lot with Caleb Ewan. He is not the new kid on the team. He's been in that structure for over 12 months now, whereas Walter Whippet is on a brand new team. Last year he finished 3rd. He was riding for the Drapac team last year. Here he's riding for Cannondale. He said to me the other day that they've actually been practicing the lead-outs, but practicing lead-outs on the road is completely different to coming at it when you're coming for the first big victory for your new team.
Well, it's a lot different when there's no duel for position with 3 or 4 or 5 other teams, and speed out on the road is a great thing, but to manoeuvre in a pack like this on a circuit like this, it's all about communication and timing. You've got to know what your sprinter needs and when he needs it. And I think a couple of guys who could work very well together here, a boy van Poppel and Giacomo Nizzolo from the Trek team, along with Jack Bobridge, national champion. If he can drag them into that last lap, 2 very fast guys who could show everybody their backs on the run to the line.
The peloton now forming the race for the sprinters. Looking down from the peloton now, the sprint teams are moving their riders up towards the sharp end of this race now as we run into the closing laps. I've noticed Sky putting Ben Swift in position, Drapac putting Brenton Jones in position. The under-23 squad, Steele van Hoff has come through. And of course Caleb Ewan being brought up by Orica Greenedge. But still he's away.
Well, he certainly is still surviving. Last time he went through the finish line, he had an advantage of 15 seconds. But as he looks back down the finishing line now, he can see that big mass of riders, and they're all waiting. Everybody's waiting to take the responsibility to finish off the job and to pull him back into the fold. And you can see what Robbie was talking about a few moments ago. In the middle there, you've got Orica Greenedge. Over on the left-hand side, you've got Team Sky getting themselves organised. Coming up alongside Orica Greenedge in the dark blue jerseys are Movistar. Everyone now getting very, very nervous in this last part of the race.
And what gets very difficult for the sprinters in that situation, Paul, you can see on one side you see Sky, you see a rider at the front, and Orica Greenedge, a Movistar, but there's 6 or 7 riders lined up, the whole team lined up. That puts their sprinter 7 men deep, and when they're 7 wide across the road, he's effectively in 50th position. So when you're coming into that final part of the race, if you're going to do an effective lead out, you've got to get your team completely to the front and your sprinter actually clear of the rest of the field, so he doesn't go getting boxed in left or right. They've got to try and pull it so fast and stretch it right out. As we now see the average speed over the first 22 laps drops slightly to 48.1 kilometres an hour, but that is going to ramp right back up as they come towards the finish, and those average speeds on each lap is just going to go sky high.
Yeah, Phil, I'm just giggling a little bit there. You've got to smile, haven't you, when it's slowed down to 48 kilometres an hour.
That's right, and this is Johan Le Bon, who's got up there now for Team FDJ in that white and blue. He's been joined by Alexis Gougerd of AG2R, so we've got 3 riders up front.
Pretty impressive youngster from France as well, because at 22 years of age he got himself a stage victory in the Vuelta a España last year, and that's him just sitting in the middle there, and you can see all of a sudden a fresh pair of legs. It puts a little bit of pain onto the expression of Manuel Boiro, because having ridden on his own, all of a sudden the 2 guys that have joined him really trying to stretch out the advantage. But it's the big team on the international circuit are doing the pacemaking on the front. The man from Wales, Cardiff in Wales, in fact, Geraint Thomas.
Now in the middle you can see the men in pink getting themselves towards the front of the peloton. They'll be riding for the Slovenian Marko Kump, quite a handy finisher himself, quite fast. And you know, if you're here, even without a great sprinter, you've got to put your fastest guy up there and let him have a go. You never know what'll happen first race of the year.
Heading into the last 12 kilometres of the race here as they make that sweeper left and take a good look at the finishing approach as we're coming down here. These 3 riders still clear, Gougerd, Le Bon and Boiro, but the peloton now, and it's Sky who's got control, and largely Geraint Thomas, who is at the head of the race as well, bringing them all back into the fold on lap 24.
When you start to think about it, Robbie, as well, when you look at Team Orica Greenedge, Simon Gerrans, in the past, he's been a very good lead-out man, and they've got a good combination with a guy like Daryl Impey. But with all the accidents and problems he's had over his career over the last 12 months, do you think he's still got the nerve there to get involved in the sprint at this level? Because this first big race, everybody wants to get the win, and a lot of young guys are trying to make an impression, and you know what it's like out there. They will take risks.
They will take risks. It's a very difficult little circuit. It's quite technical. The roads are wide and straight, and it makes it even more difficult because so many guys can come down both sides of the road. And a guy like Simon Gerrans, well, he doesn't want to jeopardise his season, let alone this race itself, but he does want to be involved and help the team because the team works so hard for him. He wants to play a role as well. Sky now at the front. They've seen next time round they're going to get 5 laps to go. They're trying to figure out how far out can we start to go, string it right out and take control of the front and not give it up anymore. All teams are thinking still just a little bit too far. We want to hit it at about 4 or 3.5 laps to go and try and hold that front position while keeping their sprinter right up the front out of trouble. We see Caleb Ewan just freewheeling there in the wheel of Matthew Heyman. They're waiting for that moment to really start as Lamprey also now come and move up on the left, and the bright green of Cannondale with Walter Whippet.
Well, Sky have definitely got Ben Swift in the hottest seat at the moment. Last of the men in black. Little surge here as they're trying to reposition the Caleb Ewan now. He's going to take Sky on shoulder to shoulder very, very shortly. Walter Whippet, he wears those light lime green colours. He's trying to be put in position, but they're massing right across the road now. You're going to have to be a tough man to break in.
Well, I was just listening to what Robbie said a little bit earlier on, and I kind of can just about remember that it's moments like this, Robbie, that if you touch those brakes, you've lost it. You go shooting back 20 or 30 positions, and it takes a lot of energy to try and reposition yourself up towards the front end of the main field. And now the ideal thing is really to keep your hands away from the brakes.
You've just got to consider that your brakes no longer exist. You just don't be the guy that grabs for them first. What I'm looking at here, what it reminds me of what Sky are doing a few years ago when CJ Sutton and Greg Henderson finished 1-2 in this race, and looks like might have a little mishap there, a bit of a touch of the brakes for the riders at the back, and that's what I mean. They need to accelerate again now. They're not going to be able to get back to the front. But what Sky are doing are positioning on the left-hand side of the road. They're all left-hand turns, so they've got the whole race on the outside. That's how they take control. They keep the pace high, get into the turns. When they try to come around them, other teams, they just keep them wide and keep that inside running. They're riding a shorter circuit in effect than the others, and when the speed's so high, it's easy to maintain.
Well, you can see in the red jersey there of Lotto Soudal, one of the most experienced riders when it comes down to sprinting, and a former winner on this circuit. Greg Henderson just floating around there, using all his professional knowledge over many, many years, and of course his track nous as well, to keep himself in the right place and not using too much energy.
Well, we saw Greg do it last year, take the wheel of Marcel Kittel with a bit of shoulder work through the bunch. He's also been on Team Sky. He knows Ben Swift very well. He knows what's going on here. He's a master of putting himself in the right position. Even if he doesn't have the legs, he's still going to get a great result.
Well, the work rate here of Geraint Thomas on the front. He's also got the British champion, his teammate, tucked into his slipstream from the Isle of Man, Peter Kenyuk. And the last man in black is Ben Swift. And they're setting such a pace here, the other teams are having it hard to get just alongside them.
Well, talk about breathe in as you sweep around that left-hand bend, using all of the road. Just looking at the flags over to the right-hand side, hardly a breath of air, the breath of wind in the air this afternoon, and I think it's quite important to remember that, Robbie, as we see somebody having a little bit of a hard time just on the back.
Primož, he was in the first breakaway of the day, and now he's finding the pace a little bit quick as we come to the end of what is going to be not far over 1 hour of racing for 51 kilometres. Very quick indeed, and it's all down to Geraint Thomas here, the man on Sky. As we're looking at the average speed, he's shot up now. It's gone over 50 kilometres. Robbie, this is an incredible speed, 50.6.
Well, when you get towards the end of this hour, and well, especially if you haven't raced yet this season, it gets very, very tough this last 10 minutes to maintain that speed, and you're happy just to hang on, let alone move up in the bunch. And it's the fittest riders who'll get themselves to the front now, and the most organised, and that's what Sky are very good at. They took the inside, but now and again you'll see them swap sides of the road and then swap back again. It's effectively cutting off other teams that are trying to make a run. We see Trek Segafredo trying to move up. Sky, what do? They come back towards the inside to close the road off, to stop the run of all those teams coming up the inside. And by doing that, maintaining control, Ben Swift is in a good position, freewheeling around the corner, not having to brake, not having to accelerate hard. And that's the art of keeping control of the front of the bunch.
Yes, that was Simon Gescu with the beard trying to get through on the stage of the Tour de France last year, his biggest ever victory. But frankly, Peter Kenyuk saw him coming and accelerated and pushed him right out of it. And they've got control again.
Well, some teams like to do this, don't they? They take control, they set the pace, they accelerate to make it nice and safe for their riders. Other riders have to freelance. You were pretty good yourself at freelancing, and it seems to me that that's exactly what Greg Henderson is doing now. He's not having any help at all from his teammate. He's looking for that kind of a sweet spot in the first 10 to 12 places there, where he doesn't have to use too much energy, doesn't have to touch his brakes, and he almost gets sucked along. But you have to fight to stay there.
Now look at this, Robbie, because that's Graham Brown on the front riding his 14th Santos Tour Down Under on Tuesday. He's looking where Brenton Jones is. He's trying to put Brenton Jones, a young sprinter, into a position, but Brenton's lost the wheel of Graham.
Well, Brenton is a real up-and-coming sprinter riding for Drapac. This year, so far alone, he's finished second 6 times to Caleb Ewan. Hopefully for him, tonight will be the night that he can break that hoodoo. But it's about getting yourself to the front and being able to stay with your lead-out man. He's the man who's going to position you. But that freelancing, if you don't have the team who can tow you into position, maintain the front like Sky are now, you've got to either just imagine, as Greg Henderson is, that he's wearing a black and blue jersey, not a bright red one. He's just become another member of Team Sky and using their lead-out as his own, and will try to come off Ben Swift if that's going to be the lead-out. Here's an attack from one of the BMC riders.
Floris Hertz again, yep. Well, that's another 51 km/h lap that time through. We're on lap number 27 now. Floris Hertz has been the only attacker really for, and if that was the first lap, I've noticed inside 2 minutes, Paul, 1:59 done by Peter Kenyuk, who's now dropped away from the sharp end.
Well, I was asking the question a little earlier on of myself whether or not in this criterium Caleb Ewan would be wearing his National Criterium Championships jersey. Well, he certainly is. It's slightly different to the Orica Green Edge jersey. And you can see, you actually can also see, Robbie, that he's sporting an aerodynamic helmet here this afternoon as well, looking for every little bit of advantage he can. And I thought a little bit of a nervous move there, because he made the effort to move up round the outside as if he felt that he was sitting too far back. But we're still looking at 3 laps to go next time they come up.
There's just 6 kilometres to go, but with all these corners, you've really got to be right at the head of affairs, so you don't need to prop, you don't need to touch the brakes, you can just keep cruising. Caleb Ewan fighting to stay in the wheel of his teammates. He's got 3 in front of him at the moment, right behind the bright green of Team Cannondale riding for Walter Whippet. And on the left we see the Dimension Data riders. Tyler Farrer is up there, and it looks like they've still got 3 together. Renshaw, I think, may just be the man for the sprint today for Dimension Data.
Well, he was certainly the 3rd place rider of Dimension Data there, and although everybody has told us it was going to be Tyler Farrer, you know, let's not forget Mark Renshaw is a great sprinter. He's been one of the greatest lead-out men in the world, but he is racing in Australia, let's not forget.
Well, that was a 1 minute 57 laps. That's taken us well into the 51 kilometres an hour average speed as we're out on lap 28 of 30. Caleb Ewan is number 16, just peeping into the top of our picture. He must wonder what hit him here. The team wouldn't let him ride this race last year because they said he was too young, but he had 14 wins all up, including wins in Australia as well, and now they feel he's ready. Well, let's see if they can guide him safely through the traffic here.
Well, I'll tell you what, Mark Renshaw is looking very concentrated there on the wheel of Tyler Farrer, who is a very good sprinter in his own right. But these are the moments, Robbie, when you're a sprinter, you have to have complete confidence in your teammates. You've got to let them do the positioning, and you've just almost got to follow blindly.
You do. You just have to sit on that wheel and trust that your teammates are going to get you in the right position. At the moment, it's Team Sky who are completely in control. A couple of Orica Green Edge riders, they've done their work. They've done the chase of all the breakaways. They're at the back now. But it's Sky still with 4 men left on the front. Ben Swift in 4th position. We saw Ian Stannard up the back straight. He's now swung into 2nd wheel behind, I think that's Salvatore Puccio on the front now.
Yep.
Orica Green Edge hovering on the left-hand side of the road as we look at it. Team Sky now down to 3 men and coming in to get 2 laps to go. 3 men for 4 kilometres. I'm asking myself if they're going to quite make it or not.
Well, they might run out of firepower. I see that Graham Brown has managed to locate Brenton Jones, and we'll see what he can do about that. But everybody wants a slice of the cake now, as they've sensed Sky are running out of firepower. Ian Stannard has gone up to the front to